Macmillan Audio presents The Death of Cancer by Vincent T. DeVita Jr., M.D., and Elizabeth DeVita-Raeburn. Read for you by Stephen Mclaughlin. To my daughter, Elizabeth, my son, Ted, and their mother, Mary Kay, my inspiration. And to my patients everywhere, heroes, all of them. Introduction. When I was a child in the 1940s, long before I had any notion of becoming an oncologist, Aunt Violet, my godmother and a frequent visitor in my household, stopped coming over. My parents ceased talking about her, too. It was as if she had disappeared. Several months into this state of affairs, my father drove me from our home in Yonkers to her apartment in New York City. He told me that she was sick and that she wanted to see me. We went in, and I sat on the living room floor playing with the toy car Aunt Violet had given me. The ink spots crooned "If I Didn't Care" from the record player. Aunt Violet was a bubbly woman, by far my favorite relative. We had a special bond. It was just like her to put on the music I loved when she knew I was coming. I looked up when I heard the bedroom door open. The Aunt Violet I knew was vivacious, with dark brown eyes, curly brown hair, and a voluptuous figure. The woman who stood watching me was quiet, gaunt, and sad. Her skin looked yellow next to her white chenille bathrobe. I was only 6, but I knew something was terribly wrong. I knew also that I should talk to her, but I didn't know what to say. I ducked my head and began running my car around the legs of the record player, too scared and confused to look up. I was acutely aware of her standing there, silently watching me. Finally, my father told me it was time to go home. I picked up my car, and we left. Several weeks later, my parents told me that Aunt Violet had died. She was just 36. Years later, I learned that she'd had cervical cancer. Her case had apparently been so advanced by the time she was diagnosed that there was little her doctors could do. There wasn't much that could be done for most people with cancer in those days, even if it was caught early. The main treatments were surgeries that were often disfiguring or toxic doses of radiation. Those treatments helped only the lucky few whose cancers were discovered before they had spread. There were no drugs to fight cancer then, and barely more than a third of people diagnosed with it survived. It was such a dreadful diagnosis, in fact, that many people, including my parents, couldn't bring themselves to utter the word. If they did, it was in a whisper, "Cancer," as if there were something shameful about it. Or maybe it was superstition, the fear that merely saying the word out loud was tempting fate, like waving a red cape in front of a bull. Individuals like my aunt were the incarnation of people's worst fear, apparently healthy one minute, facing certain death the next. 2 decades after my aunt's death, as a newly minted doctor, I found my career taking an unexpected turn. A couple of years after graduating from George Washington University's medical school, I walked onto the cancer wards at the National Cancer Institute, NCI, a reluctant trainee. I wanted to be a cardiologist, but Vietnam was in full swing, and doctors weren't exempt from the draft. The National Institutes of Health, NIH, which included a number of disease-specific institutes, was one of the few legal outs. It was part of the Public Health Service, which was considered one of the uniformed services. If you served there as a clinical associate, that is, a trainee, you got credit for serving in the armed forces. I'd blown my interview for a spot as a clinical associate at the National Heart Institute, yet I'd been offered one at the National Cancer Institute. It was a depressing assignment, but it was fighting cancer or stitching people back together on the battlefield. I chose cancer. At the NCI, I saw a lot of people who looked just like my Aunt Violet had at the end of her life. Gaunt, sad, yellow. In the many years since her death,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?